I read that when you reach the age of 35, of course, which I'm just a year or two past, but when you reach the age of 35, you only have 500 days left to really live. Days that are really yours to think and act and create and invest in whatever way you desire. Here was the thinking. The average person lives into their 70s, which means that if you are in your mid-30s, you have, on average, maybe 35 to 40 years left to live. During that time, you have to eat, work, sleep. You need to travel, take showers, things that eat up time in a prescribed way. It's not really your time to do with as you choose. They're have-to times. One study found that paid work, housework, eating, and sleeping, just those four, take up about 80% of any given day. 80% of the 1,440 minutes, the 24 hours we have available. And then there are the takeaway times, the time that just gets eaten up against our will by circumstance. For example, in the average lifetime, the typical American will spend 6 months sitting at traffic lights waiting for them to change, 8 months opening up junk mail or dealing with spam email. They'll spend 2 years, the equivalent of 2 years, trying to call people who aren't in or whose line is busy or being put on hold by a bank or an airline or whoever. We'll spend 3 years on average in meetings and 5 years waiting in lines. So once you subtract all of this from your life, if you're in the mid-30s, you really have equivalent of about 500 days left to live life as you choose. What are you going to do with those 500 days? What are you doing with those 500 days? You'd think we would be actively investing and spending our time on things that are significant, but we're not. The average person living in the United States spends, now get this, this was an article I was reading in Forbes, the average person in the United States spends 1,300 hours a year on social media, over 2,000 hours a year, right at between 5 and 6 hours a day on our phones. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think I know how we're all gonna feel at the end of our life. We're gonna look back on that and have a lot of regret. Those two ideas, that life is short, we really don't have much of it to spend to begin with, and it goes by so fast. And the idea that because we have a limited amount of it and it's so short, we should do everything good with it, significant with it, we possibly can. Those two ideas are at the heart of what we're going to be exploring today in our journey through the New Testament letter of James. A section of the letter that is only 5 verses long. That's all we're going to look at. Let me read all 5 of them right now. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, make money. Why, you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast and brag. All such boasting is evil. Anyone then who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it sins. Okay, let's unpack that. James begins by targeting a particular kind of person, or more accurately, a particular kind of mindset. The mindset that says, here's what I'm going to do with my life. Here's my 5, 10, 20-year plan. I know where I'm going to travel. I know where I'm going to live. I know how long I'm going to spend there. I know the deals I'm going to make, the steps up the ladder that I'm going to take, the money I'm going to earn. Now, we all think that way to a degree, I know. We all make plans. We all lay out a course for our life and we try to follow it. And that's just being responsible. And throughout its pages, the Bible encourages us to prepare for the days to come in a responsible way. We're told to be smart in terms of saving our money and doing the kind of work that would keep us employed and being strategic in our dealings with others. James isn't contradicting any of that. He's wanting to expose something that can seep into good, solid planning and preparation. He wants to talk about a spirit, a mindset, an attitude that can creep in along with it that is not healthy and not good. And it's all tied up in one little word. Let me read that opening verse again, and I will purposefully emphasize the word. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. That's the word. Will. I will do this. I will do that. James says, you have no will involved in this at all. And then he goes after that. Let me read it. Why, you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. What James is after isn't about planning, it's about presumption. Presumption is just that, presuming upon something. Most dictionaries would talk about the idea of being presumptuous or to presume as to take it upon yourself without permission or authority to actually dare. It's an overstepping of proper boundaries. It's the taking of something for granted. It's thinking that your future is yours to have and yours to live and yours to presume upon, but it's not. You have no idea what tomorrow will hold or if you'll even be given a tomorrow. You don't know if you'll even have the rest of this day. Dave Freeman co-authored a book titled 100 Things to Do Before You Die. Fun read, filled with travel events you shouldn't miss. For the U.S., it included things like the Iditarod sled dog race, the Academy Awards ceremony, New Year's Eve in Times Square, Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Outside the U.S., on the list were things like Carnival in Brazil, Bastille Day in France, Oktoberfest in Germany, the running of the bulls in Spain, and, of course, the Sydney Fringe Festival nude night surfing in Australia. Sign me up. Dave's goal wasn't just to write the book. The whole plan was to write the book and then live the book. It was his life plan to do all 100. At final count, Dave had accomplished about half of them, but that would be all. He died after hitting his head during a fall at his home in Los Angeles. He was 47. No matter what we plan, no matter what we set out to accomplish, the reality is we have no idea what the future holds. But that's not all that James reminds us of. Not only do we not know what will happen tomorrow, the entire scope of our life, that imagery he used, no matter how long we live, he said it's just like a mist, a morning fog that vanishes almost as soon as it appears, meaning it flies by. It just flies by, which makes every moment precious, every moment significant. Which is why James then says this to all of our presumption in light of the brevity of every life. He writes, instead, and of course he's saying, instead of I will, instead you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, in other words, if you're just saying what you're going to do, you just boast and brag. James challenges us to see every day our next breath, the very next beat of our heart as a gift from God, totally in God's hands. What happens tomorrow is a God thing. It is not up to us. It is not about us. It is not through us or because of us. Make plans, but do it in humility and submit them to God. It's almost as if James is giving us a tool to use. No matter what we map out, make it a habit to just, after you map it out, whisper the little prayer, God willing. We'll pay off the house and move to the beach. God willing. We'll take 10 more years and then retire. God willing. We'll put our kids in this school and then we're going to save this much for college. God willing. If we keep that little 2-word prayer with us, close to us, on our lips, on our hearts, it will remind us to hold everything before God with an open hand and to live that life in light of the one to come. But there's more potency in that 2-word prayer than just that. It's also the key to starting a brand new adventure or adventures in your life. You see, praying for what God wills is more than just words. It's not a little saying you tack on. It's a question. God, what is your will? What do you want me to do? I've got these plans. I've got these ideas. I've got these dreams, but you may want to do a little dreaming yourself. So this is about saying, God, I want to give you full permission to send in any play into the game of my life that you want. Call any audible. I want my life to be yours. You tell me what to do and I'll do it. God willing isn't a prayer that you will be able to do what you want. It is a prayer that you will listen to what God wants, which is how James ends. Let me read that final verse again. Anyone then who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it sins. If you live in such a way that you don't presume upon the future, if you live in such a way that you see the brevity of life and how fleeting it really is, if you live in such a way that you are constantly putting your life into God's hands, then James says, well, you'll seize this day then for all the good you can possibly do with it. God will lead you into those good things, and he's going to give you this day to do good things. Not doing those things would be insane. Actually, James ups the voltage. He says it's sin. We tend to think of sin. Now, that's interesting. If it startled you, that he used such a heavy word. It's because of a common, something that's very common to overlook. We tend to think of sin as being in just one category, as sins of commission. James is raising up another category, the sins of omission. Jesus once told a story, and Jesus was very much about sins of omission. He once told a story of 3 men who were each given a sum of money to manage, and 2 took their money and invested it and doubled it for its owner. 1 took it and buried it. He hadn't done anything wrong with the money. He just hadn't done anything right with the money. And that's the one Jesus took to task. He told another story that became one of the most well-known of all of his stories, the story of the Good Samaritan. A man had been assaulted and left by the side of the road. 2 very religious and pious men walked by and did nothing. Now, they hadn't been the ones who robbed him. They hadn't been the ones who had beaten him. They were just the ones who walked by and did nothing. And they were the ones Jesus singled out. And then there was a story Jesus told of how men and women will be accepted at the end of their lives, and those who will find themselves on the outside of acceptance, and those at the end of time, and those who will be accepted at the end of time. Those who were accepted were the ones who gave food to those who were hungry, drink for the thirsty, shelter for those in need, clothes for the naked. They visited those in prison, cared for those who were sick. Those who were rejected were those who did nothing. Again, the sin of omission. We're so concerned with making sure we don't do the wrong things. James, along with Jesus, says to make sure, well, yeah, but think about doing the right things in their place. It's not just about commission, it's about omission. And at the end of life's run, it may be the things left undone that will weigh most heavily for the verdict on our lives. In fact, the truth is, there's probably going to be a lot more sins of omission than sins of commission for the average person. So along with all the other presumptions you can make about your life, don't make the one that goes, and this is how this can kind of play out, it's really insidious. Once I make this amount of money, reach this place in my career, have this much saved up, then I'll do the good I know to do. Another way of doing it is you tell yourself, well, once I get the kids out of diapers, or get the kids out of elementary school, or get the kids out of high school, or get the kids out of college, or I get past this wedding, or I get past this season where my kids need me to babysit their kids, then I'll start getting involved and serving. You don't know if you're going to have tomorrow. And you most certainly won't have all of the tomorrows you're banking on. There isn't a single person who has died in all of human history that their death didn't come sooner than they thought. And no matter how long you live, if you're thinking you always have to wait until after this is over or after that is done, you'll never do it. Because there will always be something ahead of you to be done or to get past or to accomplish. No, all throughout Scripture, and what James is trying to hammer home here is seize the day, this day, to do good. The good you know to do, the good God has asked you to do, the good he's put before you to do, the promptings he sent your way. And if you're thinking, well, I better run out as fast as I can to a food shelter or a food bank and volunteer or something like, well, yeah, but it's actually more foundational than, special serve events like that, which I hope you are invested in. But it's about, the good of changing the way you're relating to people, forgiving the person who has wronged you, trusting God to care for you with that risky step of obedience, restoring that broken relationship, visiting that lonely person, reaching out to that child, writing that check, inviting that friend, volunteering to meet that need. Since we don't know what tomorrow will hold, and this could be your last day to live, spend it like your last day. It's just so easy to fall into the idea that if time was short, you'd want to get as much out of this life as you possibly could, kind of like the old Tim McGraw song. I'm not big into country music, but I remember this one for some reason, called Live Like You Were Dying. He sang about skydiving and Rocky Mountain climbing and riding a bull. But if you have any sense of what James is saying about the true nature of our life in light of eternity, if you knew this was your last day, you wouldn't want to run out and get all the thrill experiences you could for yourself. You would want to do all the good deeds you could for others, because that's what will matter when this life is over. If you had only a few hours left, you would want to spend them to get ready for the eternity to come. You would realize that it wouldn't matter whether you skydived or not before you died. Things like that will seem trivial beyond compare. What will matter is what you did that will live on throughout eternity. The good you did, the lives you changed, the honor you gave God. That's what realizing you may not have another tomorrow will do to you if you get it. Really get it. This is what marked Jesus. He was a seize the day person. He lived with the kind of what matters most mentality. One day he was walking toward Jerusalem and was hurrying somewhat to get there in order to celebrate a very important Jewish festival known as Passover. But on the way, he stopped and healed a blind man who was a beggar by the side of the road. The people with Jesus were frustrated that he had stopped because they knew they needed to get to the city. But Jesus had a different understanding of what mattered. That blind man by the side of the road mattered. Well, Jesus took up the walk again, and actually they got to Jerusalem and entered the town, and there he ran into a man named Zacchaeus who wanted to spend time with him. He was one of many people lining the road trying to get a glimpse of Jesus, and Jesus did it again. He said yes. He veered off schedule and said, I would be delighted. In fact, I'd love to be in your home today. And you could just almost see the disciples rolling their eyes, just saying, oh my gosh, this is going to upset the schedule. And also, Jesus, don't you know, this Zacchaeus guy, he's a tax collector. You don't want to be spending time with him. Tax collectors were well known for having cheated, bribed, and extorted their way to the top. From everybody's perspective, including his inner circle, Jesus was wasting his time. From where Jesus was standing, it wasn't wasted time. It was a good that needed to be done. And it was. Zacchaeus ended up becoming a follower of Jesus, returning money he had extorted, helping the poor, and extending the cause of Christ. So it was interesting, on that particular day, after the event with the blind beggar and the issue with Zacchaeus, after a day that was driven by a different GPS system than they were following, Jesus gathered his closest circle of followers and gave them a life lesson. Knowing about the day, knowing that they were frustrated, knowing about their priorities, Jesus said this to them: I, the Messiah, have come to search for and to save such souls as these. So let's get this life lesson down, because it is so, so important. Life is short. You don't know how much of it you have left, but whatever it isn't much. So seize the day. Seize it to do good, so that whenever the end comes, you will have lived the life God willed for you. You will have people saying about you all the good that you did. And no matter when it comes, no matter how short your life may be, it will have been lived fully as a result. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, make money, while you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast and brag. All such boasting is evil. Anyone then who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it sins.